During the day, a long airplane flies through thick clouds. Inside, a young person named Ketcha is overcome with grief and anger, screaming at a larger figure to stay away. Elsewhere in the aircraft, Asbel is shaken while trying to reason with Ketcha, who accuses him and that girl of tricking the Holy One into his death. As Ketcha whispers in despair, Asbel sadly wonders what good dying does. In the cockpit, Yupa pilots the plane. Later, Yupa suggests it is best to leave Ketcha alone for a while, and a dejected Asbel agrees, saying he understands how she feels. Asbel looks out a window, worried about his Mani tribe. Yupa asks Asbel about the plan to destroy the Omu tank. Asbel explains that the Holy One only told him and Ketcha, anticipating that Miralupa, the Holy Emperor's brother, was coming. Yupa explains that Miralupa is the true power behind the Dorok throne and possesses psychic abilities. He believes Miralupa will read the minds of the Mani people and, seeing they had no plans to rebel, will likely spare them. The plane flies towards gathering storm clouds, and the pilot worries they have not yet shaken their pursuers. Asbel tells Yupa that the Doroks used a bioengineered Omu larva to lure an Omu herd to crush Kushana's army. The larva was grown in the tank they destroyed. He recalls the Holy One explaining that they could grow an Omu from just a small piece of its body. The Holy One believed that toying with life in this way would enrage the forest and doom humanity. This reminds Asbel of a girl who taught him that the Omu are magnificent creatures. Yupa guesses the girl's name is Nausikaya. Asbel is stunned, then realizes with a smile that Yupa must be the teacher she spoke of. Suddenly, severe turbulence hits the aircraft. Asbel rushes to take the controls while Yupa protects the terrified Ketcha, who is thrown about the cabin. The child eventually cries herself to sleep in Yupa's arms. Yupa brings the sleeping Ketcha into the cockpit for safety as Asbel pilots through the worsening storm. Yupa wonders if the Doroks have more Omu vats and advises Asbel to put on his mask as a precaution. Asbel struggles with the controls and asks Yupa to manage the throttle. Yupa admires Asbel's skill as a pilot. Asbel remarks that he wouldn't have believed an Omu could be grown if he hadn't seen it himself. Yupa explains that the skills to manipulate life are ancient arts, preserved in the crypt of Shua, the Dorok's sacred capital. He suspects Miralupa has revived these forbidden techniques to win the war. Asbel asks if the god warriors were created with the same skills. The storm becomes too intense, and Asbel is forced to turn back from a massive thunderhead crackling with lightning. Yupa asks for more details about the god warrior, and Asbel laughs at his calm curiosity in the face of death, saying it reminds him of the fearless Nausicaa. Hearing her name, Ketcha makes a sound of disapproval. The turbulence throws Ketcha around, and she screams in terror. Yupa comforts her again. Asbel then begins to tell the story of the god warrior. In a flashback to the city of Pejitai, he describes how miners found a massive ceramic skeleton. While excavating, they found a black cube attached to the body, which they believed might be a control unit. A panel on the cube opened, revealing a small stone-like object. Thinking it might be a key, a worker moved the stone to an identical empty slot next to it. When nothing happened, they assumed the god warrior was incomplete and sealed the area. Days later, workers discovered in horror that the skeleton was regenerating, growing a pulsating heart and muscles. The lead engineer realized the cube was a Genesis machine activated by the stone and ordered it removed. Back in the present, Asbel tells Yupa that the god warrior stopped growing but remains alive, buried deep beneath Pejitai. Yupa now understands why the Vai Emperor attacked Pejitai and realizes the stone Asbel's sister gave to Nausicaa was the activation key. Asbel confesses that he threw the stone away deep in the toxic forest and would never reveal its location. Yupa worries that Miralupa himself has come north because he may have learned of the god warrior's existence. Suddenly, Yupa spots a break in the clouds, and Asbel steers the plane toward it. As they emerge from the storm, they find themselves directly in front of a massive Dorok airship. The Dorok soldiers spot them and open fire. The gunship tries to evade, but a shell hits its right engine, causing an explosion. Trailing black smoke, the damaged plane plummets into the dense clouds below. Far away from where Yupa's plane went down, a single Toramekian airship flies high above a sea of clouds. On deck, a crewman takes a navigational reading from the sun. Inside, another crewman calls out coordinates, which Kurotoa records. He confirms their position is accurate. Kurotoa enters Princess Kushana's quarters to report. He informs her that they have crossed the Sea of Corruption and are now flying over Dorok territory. Kushana looks over a military map, and Kurotoa shows her their location relative to the Toramekian front lines. He suggests they can rejoin the main army in about a day's flight. Kushana, however, orders him to find a place to land immediately, refusing to head east. She correctly guesses that Kurotoa is eager to rejoin the main army because it is commanded by her elder brother. Suddenly, Kushana draws a pistol and points it at Kurotoa. She accuses him of being a spy sent by her brothers, who arranged the entire military operation as a trap to eliminate her. She says his true mission was to secure the God Warrior's control stone. She dismisses his claims of loyalty, stating he only protected her until he could learn the stone's location. Kushana knows he intended to take Nausicaa back to Toramikia and torture the information out of her. Caught, Kurotoa drops his act and laughs. He admits he knows her real plan. She never intended to fight the Doroks, but planned to reunite with her loyal Third Army to march on the capital and seize the throne. As Kushana prepares to kill him, Kurotoa begs her to stop. He explains that, as a commoner, he knew the royal family would have had him killed regardless of whether he succeeded or failed in his mission. Realizing his only path to survival was to choose a different side, he offers his loyalty and services to her, arguing he is more useful than her other officers. Kushana tests him, demanding to know who gave him his orders. After hesitating, Kurotoa confesses his mission came directly from her father, the Vai Emperor himself. Kushana is shocked and enraged by her father's betrayal. She dismisses Kurotoa from her room. Relieved to have survived, Kurotoa steps into the corridor, where a crewman tells him Nausicaa is saying strange things. Alone, Kushana reflects on her father's treachery, seeing it as the fulfillment of her family's destiny, symbolized by its crest of two fighting serpents. Her thoughts are interrupted by Kurotoa calling her on a speaking tube. He reports that Nausicaa smells something happening below the cloud cover. Filled with a new resolve to tear the throne from her father, Kushana orders Kurotoa to take the helm. On the deck of the Toramekian airship, Nausicaa smells something burning in the distance. Kushana recognizes the scent as gunpowder, indicating a battle is happening below the clouds. Kushana orders the crew to their battle stations and tells Kurotoa to fly the ship down. The large airship descends into the thick cloud cover. As they get closer, Kushana realizes with horror that she also smells burning flesh. The ship breaks through the clouds to reveal a small Dorak village engulfed in fire. They see two smaller Toramekian aircraft bombing the village. Nausicaa is appalled by the destruction of the small settlement, while Kushana watches with a grim expression. One of the bombers approaches their airship and signals for them to identify themselves. In response, Kurotowa announces to the crew that their ship is officially breaking away from Army Command. Kushana's airship then opens fire, destroying the approaching bomber in a large explosion. Nausicaa is shocked that they have attacked their own side's aircraft. After the second bomber is also destroyed, Kushana's ship engages in a chaotic battle with other Torumekian planes above the village. The crewmen are confused and shout to each other, wondering why they are fighting their own army. In the aftermath of the air battle, Nausicaa flies her personal glider down through the smoke into the burning Dorok village below. On the ground, the swordsman Yupa has also arrived, moving through a field littered with the bodies of soldiers and their mounts. After landing, Nausicaa discovers the fallen soldiers are all Torumekian troops. While the air battle continues overhead, she enters a damaged building to investigate. She concludes that the men and their animals were dead before the bombs fell. To her horror, Nausicaa finds evidence of toxic miasma, realizing the village was attacked by spores from the distant forest. High above, Kushana orders her pilot to land their airship in the village to find food and water. Meanwhile, Nausicaa spots a large temple that the fire has not reached and flies toward it. She discovers that all the doors and windows have been sealed from the inside. After getting no response from knocking, she climbs the stone wall and forces an opening to get inside. The temple is filled with the bodies of the villagers who died after taking shelter from the miasma. Nausicaa is overcome with sorrow at the sight of so much death. Suddenly, she hears what sounds like a baby crying. Following the sound through the temple, she finds a huddled figure. Upon getting closer, she discovers the sound is not from a person, but from a recording device they are holding. Later, Kushana's large airship has landed, and her soldiers secure the quiet village. While exploring the ruined village, Kurotowa finds Nausicaa's glider parked on the ground. He tracks her to a nearby temple, cautiously calling her name as he enters. Inside, he is shocked to find Nausicaa in a dark room filled with the bodies of the dead villagers. Nausicaa is sitting on the floor, comforting two infant children she has found alive among the deceased. She offers one of the babies a chico nut from her pouch. Kurotowa angrily tells her they cannot take the children with them. But Nausicaa ignores him and gently feeds the softened nut to one of the infants. Kurotowa scoffs that in a war they cannot save every child they find, but Kushana tells him to be quiet. Suddenly, a soldier runs up to Kushana, reporting that a reconnaissance patrol has been found dead in the village center. He explains that, strangely, there are no marks on their bodies, and even their mounts are dead. Just then, gunfire is heard from the cliffs nearby. A soldier exclaims that it's the men who were sent to find water. Inside the temple, Nausicaa hears this and has a sudden realization about the well. She understands why the soldiers are in danger. She rushes outside and thrusts the two children into Kushana's arms, pleading for her to take them. Nausicaa explains that she must hurry or the men will die. Before Kushana can react, Nausicaa dashes to her glider and takes off. Kushana is left awkwardly holding the two babies. Nausicaa flies her glider over the running soldiers toward a small stone well. At the well, Nausicaa learns from a soldier that two of his comrades are trapped below with a monster. After instructing another soldier on how to perform first aid, she puts on her filter mask and prepares to descend. The scene changes to the underground cavern at the bottom of the well. Nausicaa lowers herself down a rope into the darkness. Inside, she discovers the bodies of the Toromikian bomber crew floating in a dark pool of water. Moving deeper, she finds a massive insectoid creature has trapped the last surviving soldier. Nausicaa throws a sonic device to stun the insect, warning the man to plug his ears. A powerful shockwave erupts, temporarily disabling the creature. Nausicaa tells the soldiers to retreat slowly and quietly while it is safe. She realizes the Toromikians had been bombing the village to try and kill this creature, which she notes is badly injured and must have followed the miasma into the well by mistake. Suddenly, the insect recovers its senses. It lunges forward, grabbing one of the soldiers in its tentacles. The creature also captures Nausicaa and carries her away, knocking her rifle from her hands. The other soldiers, believing she is doomed, flee the cavern. Back on the surface, the escaped soldiers report to Kurotoa what happened. Enraged, Kurotoa decides to go down into the well himself to investigate. Deep in the cavern, Nausicaa is held within the insect's tentacles, but is not harmed. Instead, she has a strange mental connection with the creature. She realizes it is not hostile toward her, and understands that it is reacting to her clothes. A large caped figure also arrives in the cavern, preparing to attack the creature. Nausicaa, now on the creature's back, signals for the stranger not to shoot, explaining that the insect is now calm. She encourages the creature, which flies across the cavern to a small alcove where it lays its eggs and then quietly dies. The caped figure shows Nausicaa that the mother insect has died, and a new, different creature now stands guard over her eggs. Nausicaa understands the creature was only trying to find a safe place for its children before it died. The story continues in a Dorok village by a well, where people run and shout in alarm. Inside a mushroom-shaped dwelling, Nausicaa appears pale and shaken after her ordeal in the cavern. 3 soldiers who had fled apologize for abandoning her, but she dismisses it, insisting they must get a boy who inhaled the miasma back to their airship. An injured Kurotoa points out that spores from the giant insect have contaminated the well, and that the entire village will soon be consumed by the toxic forest. He orders his men to get explosives to seal the entrances to the cavern. The scene shifts to a large, insect-like Toromekian airship which is taking off from the village. On board, Princess Kushana orders the crew to continue their southern advance and to post extra lookouts. The boy who inhaled the miasma lies gasping for breath. With no medic on the ship, Nausicaa takes charge of his care, calling for water and a respirator. Elsewhere on the ship, Kurotoa is irritated by the crying of the 2 Dorok infants. He yells at the older men caring for them, complaining that this is a warship, not a refugee transport. One of the men calmly informs him that Kushana herself gave permission for the babies to be aboard. On the bridge, Kurotoa tells Kushana that Nausicaa is like a witch for the way she communicated with the insect in the well. He complains that she disobeys orders and collects babies. Kushana reminds Kurotoa that he himself risked his life to save her, acknowledging that Nausicaa has a mysterious power that could prove very useful. As the ship flies over a barren landscape, Kushana reflects that Nausicaa seems to be leading them straight into the heart of the conflict in the Dorok lands, where she hopes to find what she seeks. In the main hold, Nausicaa tends to the sick boy Satoru, who is hooked up to a respirator being pumped by a soldier. She warns the soldier to be gentle, as the boy's lungs are severely damaged. Suddenly, Satoru convulses as blood begins to fill his lungs. He spits up a large amount of dark, poisoned blood, splattering Nausicaa. As he weakly calls for his mother, Nausicaa makes a desperate decision. She presses her mouth to his and begins to suction the poisoned blood from his lungs herself. Her companions can only watch in shock. From the bridge, Kurotowa yells for Nausicaa, but receives no clear answer. Annoyed, he storms toward the back of the ship to investigate the commotion. He finds a large crowd of silent soldiers and refugees gathered together. In the center, Nausicaa cradles the now stable boy, a bowl of the dark blood she removed resting beside her. A man explains to the astonished Kurotowa that Nausicaa knowingly took the poison into her own mouth to save Satoru. Seeing the somber mood, Kurotowa steps forward to deliver a formal eulogy for the boy, worried the death will damage morale. He is interrupted by Nausicaa, who calmly announces that Satoru's breathing has stabilized and he will survive. The crowd bursts into cheers, leaving Kurotowa speechless and annoyed. Later, Nausicaa finds an older man feeding the Dorok infants in the galley. He tells her that he raised his own sister the same way, and that all babies are the same. A soldier then approaches Nausicaa and offers her his water ration to wash the blood from her face. A bright flash of light appears in the sky, alerting the crew on the Toromician airship. An alarm sounds as the crew is ordered to their battle stations, having spotted unidentified ships. Through a viewport, they see several small, dark aircraft flying in the clouds. A crew member reports to Kurotowa that a flotilla of Dorok ships is ahead of them. The scene changes to the sky, showing 3 heavily armored Dorok airships flying over a strange, cloudy landscape. The crew then spots a second group of enemy ships approaching from behind their vessel. Kurotowa is amazed by the size of the Dorok navy, but Princess Kushana remains calm, stating that they have finally found their way. She looks forward with determination and orders Kurotowa to follow the Dorok fleet from a distance, believing it will lead them to the Toromician army. To avoid being seen, Kurotowa pilots their gunship low to the ground. The ship flies quickly through a narrow canyon, using the terrain as cover. A large Dorok M-ship flies overhead, unaware of them. Kurotowa remarks that the Doroks must be desperate to be moving their forces in broad daylight. As their aircraft flies over a forest in the rain, Nausicaa looks out a porthole and notices something strange about the trees. She runs through the ship, startling the crew. Leaning out of an open ramp, Nausicaa stares in horror. She sees a desolate landscape where the leaves are being stripped from the trees by the wind. She realizes with shock that the entire forest below is dead. Inside the cockpit, Kurotowa grimly orders all hands to put on their masks. Nausicaa also warns everyone that a toxic miasma is approaching and tells those without masks to find a sealed room. In the engine room, crew members call for the ship to gain altitude. Kurotowa angrily tells them to ignore Nausicaa. In another part of the ship, Nausicaa directs people to move the wounded to a safer area. She puts on her own mask while giving orders to close all open hatches. She then helps an old man and a crying child into a sealed room, telling her small animal companion, Teto, to stay and guard them. Elsewhere, crew members in a gun turret wonder what is happening. Soon, a pilot sees a strange haze up ahead and realizes it is a cloud of miasma. The pressure shatters a window, and a soldier's mask is blown away. The soldier screams as he is killed by the poison. Kurotowa, now wearing a mask, is shocked to find miasma so far from the known toxic forest. The ship flies over a bizarre new landscape filled with giant mushroom-like growths. Nausicaa recognizes it as a rotwood, a new and fast-spreading toxic forest. Kushana takes the controls and orders the ship to ascend, warning that their masks are not strong enough to protect them from this thick miasma. Kurotowa argues against it, pointing out that the Dorok fleet is flying above them. Nausicaa runs onto the wing of the aircraft, urging them to climb quickly. She looks down and sees that the forest is made of a type of poisonous fungi she has never encountered before. She looks down into a pit filled with small grubs and sees piles of large dead insects. She is horrified to see that even the insects which thrive in the normal toxic forest are dead here. Feeling a sense of dread, Kurotowa reluctantly gives the command to ascend through the miasma. The Toramekian aircraft ascends from the toxic miasma and emerges directly into the middle of a massive Dorok fleet. A chaotic air battle erupts. The Toramekian ship is rocked by explosions and hit by debris. With its fuel tanks pierced and a wing damaged, the crew is ordered to keep fighting. To escape, Nausicaa spots a gap in the miasma below, and the aircraft dives steeply back into the toxic clouds. They break through the haze and find themselves flying low over the ground, where a huge column of soldiers is marching. The scene changes to a vast battlefield. The aircraft flies over crowds of armored Dorok soldiers who react with chaos and fire at them. The Dorok infantry is accompanied by large, multi-legged landing craft and massive, rounded tanks. The landscape is littered with the wreckage of destroyed cannons from a previous battle. Following Kushana's command, the ship alters course, hoping to find the Toramekian army. They fly over a ridge where Toramekian soldiers are fighting a desperate, losing battle with siege guns. In the distance, a city is burning. Kushana spots a tattered black flag with a serpent emblem on a nearby peak and realizes with horror that the soldiers below are her own men from the 2nd Regiment. Nausicaa watches as the soldiers are overwhelmed in brutal, close-quarters combat. Kushana is overcome with anguish and rage, questioning what commander would misuse her elite cavalry troops in a hopeless defensive fight. An officer urges her to retreat, but Kushana refuses to abandon her men. As the defensive line collapses, Kushana tells Nausicaa that this is the true face of war. They fly over a stone courtyard, crowded with defeated soldiers and refugees, including women and children. Refusing to flee, Kushana orders her personal battle flag raised on the airship. Down below, the last of her soldiers, having lost all hope, look up and see the flag. Standing atop the aircraft with her glowing sword held high, Kushana becomes a beacon of hope. Believing their princess has returned to save them, the soldiers erupt in a powerful cheer. Kurotowa observes that no one else in the empire commands such loyalty. Suddenly, a massive enemy ship fires a beam of light from above. The fortification where Kushana's soldiers were cheering is obliterated in a fiery explosion. Giant, insect-like Dorok warships emerge from the clouds. Kushana orders a full retreat. As their aircraft speeds away, another blast destroys the last remaining group of her cheering soldiers. A devastating energy beam sweeps across the landscape, destroying the city in its path. The story shifts to a battlefield where soldiers struggle through heavy rain and mud, pulling a large cannon. A group of these soldiers take shelter from the weather. Their leader informs them that the path ahead is filled with enemy Dorok troops, so they will need to find another way. The soldiers find one of their comrades has died, and they grimly decide to leave his body behind and press on through the dark forest. From a hillside, the soldiers spot a small house in the woods below and decide to search it for food. Two of them run down and cautiously approach the house. They burst through the door and find a family of an old man, an old woman, and a child inside. The soldiers threaten the family with their weapons, demanding they hand over their winter food supplies. To intimidate them further, one soldier presses his rifle to the child's head. The old man becomes enraged and attacks the soldier, but he is quickly struck down. As the lead soldier prepares to kill the old man on the floor, his comrade advises him to use a sword instead of a gun to avoid making noise. Just as the soldier is about to strike, he is interrupted by a voice from the doorway. A woman, Nausicaa, stands there holding two small children. She calmly tells the soldiers that she knows they are from the Toromechian Third Army, and that their leader, Princess Kushana, is very close. Stunned by the news that their princess is alive, the soldiers immediately become obedient and agree to wait for Nausicaa outside. With the soldiers gone, Nausicaa kneels before the peasant family and apologizes for what happened. She explains that she has been looking for someone to raise the two orphaned children she is carrying, and asks if they could at least give the babies some milk. The family's child glares at her angrily. Suddenly, the old woman slaps Nausicaa and shouts at her to leave. However, when the old woman takes one of the babies, she realizes that both children are from her own Zapata tribe. Her anger fades as she comforts the crying child. She tells Nausicaa that she wants to help, but cannot, as all of their livestock were stolen by soldiers. The old woman is filled with grief that she cannot help children of her own people. Nausicaa comforts the woman, thanks her, and says she will find someone else to care for them. The scene changes to an outdoor shelter, where the two soldiers who had threatened the family are now standing guard over the two small children. Inside Princess Kushana's flagship, the surviving soldiers report to her. They explain that they are all that is left of her 3rd Regiment. As the Dorok armies launched a massive counterattack, the soldiers recount how the Doroks used the poisonous miasma as a weapon, attacking through the toxic clouds and overwhelming their unprepared forces. Kurotoa suspects the Doroks are creating the miasma, and Kushana remembers Nausicaa had a similar suspicion about the strange forest they encountered earlier. Kushana wonders what the Dorok Emperor is planning by poisoning his own country. The soldiers finish their report, explaining that their army was ordered to cover a retreat without any support, essentially being sacrificed. Kurotawa bitterly comments that Kushana's political rivals in the empire likely planned this. Kushana expresses her gratitude that her men are still alive and dismisses them to rest. Kushana and Kurotawa look over battle maps. They are surrounded by enemy forces. To rescue the last of her troops, but Kushana decides they must go on the offensive and retake command. They agree to launch their attack at dawn. At night, Nausicaa sits alone, thinking about a telepathic message she received from an Omu about a forest needing help. She misses her father, Master Yupa, and her home in the valley before lying down to rest. The story shifts to a different location during the day, where an insect-like Dorok airship flies through the sky, dropping pods into the clouds below. The location changes again to a crash site deep within the toxic jungle. A man named Goa leads a search party into a chasm to find the bodies of those who crashed. They find signs that someone survived the fall. When they discover a body on a large fungus, Goa prepares to cut off a hand for proof of death. Suddenly, the ground erupts with worm-like creatures that attack the soldiers. Mysterious figures wearing fur and masks appear, identified by the terrified soldiers as the legendary Forest People. The soldiers surrender, and one of the Forest People tells them to leave the forest and never return. As the soldiers flee, a forest person kneels beside an unconscious survivor from the crash. The scene follows a group of forest people as they carry the survivor on a stretcher through the strange landscape of the toxic jungle. They travel to their home in a vast, hidden cavern filled with giant plants and insects. Inside one of the forest people's tents, a woman named Ketcha awakens. She finds she is with her companions, Asbel and Master Yupa, who are also alive. They look out and see they are in a massive, illuminated cavern where the forest people live. Yupa explains that according to legend, the forest people are an ancient tribe who live in harmony with the jungle, shunning fire and civilization. A large, masked forest person enters their tent. The figure removes its mask, revealing a young boy. Yupa thanks the boy, who explains that the forest itself protected them. The boy offers fruit to Ketcha, who initially refuses, but accepts after recalling a gentle memory. Yupa observes that the boy's kind gaze is just like Nausicaa's. Asbel asks the boy how they gather insect eggs without being attacked, and the boy replies that they simply ask the insects for a few. He explains that he was sent by his father because the jungle is disturbed. The giant Omu are angered and are migrating south. Yupa worries this could be a sign of the Daikeisho, a catastrophic event. The boy reveals that other creatures, like the flying Hebikera, are also heading south, indicating that something significant is happening. Hearing that the Omu are moving south, Asbel realizes that Nausicaa was also heading in that direction. Master Yupa then decides that they too must travel south to the Dorok lands to find her. The scene changes to show Nausicaa flying her aircraft at high speed. The story moves to the city fortress of Sapata, a Toromechian outpost deep in Dorok lands. The fortress is heavily damaged and surrounded by the rubble of a long siege. Toromechian soldiers hold their positions in trenches around the city. From a nearby hill, the Dorok army prepares for a massive assault. A huge military camp is visible, filled with soldiers, cannons, and vehicles. Columns of armored soldiers march through the landscape to get into position. The army assembles on the battlefield, stirred by the sound of war drums as they prepare to attack. On a nearby hill, civilians and soldiers watch the army mobilize. The entire Doric force works itself into a battle frenzy during a pre-battle ritual. On the crumbling walls of Sapata, two Toromechian soldiers listen to the Doric drums. One complains about the hateful sound, while the other notes that the Dorics are using it to make their soldiers feel invincible before they attack. Inside the fortress, in a large hall filled with wounded soldiers, a Toromechian general yells that a retreat is out of the question. He insists that their orders are to defend the castle to the death. An officer named Sene questions the command, explaining that their forces are at half strength and will not last another day. He suggests that if they attack now, they might be able to break through the enemy lines and save what is left of their army. The general becomes furious, throws a bowl at Sene, and accuses him of being afraid to die. He accuses Sene and the other officers of being followers of the traitor Kushana, and says this is their chance to prove their loyalty to the Empire's princes. He screams that they must all fight to the very last man. Outside, the Dorok ritual intensifies, with priests in strange costumes dancing wildly. A head priest addresses the army, urging the warriors to destroy the Toromechians who have invaded their sacred land. Standing on a platform, the priest shouts for the death of the Toromechian dogs, and the frenzied soldiers raise their weapons and roar in response. The scene changes to the sky above, where a large, dark airship appears. The priest on the ground recognizes it as the ship of Lord Miralupa and goes to greet him as it lands. From the ship, A figure named Lord Miralupa senses a familiar presence. Inside Lord Miralupa's quarters, an attendant is shocked to hear that the Mani tribe is in revolt, reviving old heresies. Another tries to dismiss the news as just another rumor about the blue-clad one. Miralupa disagrees, stating that this time is different and is the reason he has returned. He pulls back his cloak, revealing a body covered in intricate tattoos. He says a Mani priest sacrificed himself to prevent Miralupa from seeing the true face of the blue-clad one. The story moves to Lord Miralupa's immersion tank room. He is submerged in a large glass tank of bubbling liquid, which enhances his psychic abilities. He states that if the blue-clad one appears, it will cause chaos among the troops and could shake the foundations of their empire. He declares that they must find this person before it's too late. An attendant asks who the blue-clad one is. Miralupa answers that it is a young foreign girl who is now very close. Hearing this, the priest becomes alarmed and declares he will issue an order for his forces to capture or kill every foreign girl they find. At that moment, Miralupa recoils in agony inside the tank, as if hit by an invisible force. The priest panics and shouts for his attendants to dilute the solution in the tank. Miralupa continues to struggle violently. His attendants worry that he has been away from his home sanctuary for too long and must end the campaign soon. A battle erupts with a powerful explosion that sends soldiers flying. In Lord Miralupa's quarters, his priest, Charuka, is alarmed by the sound of anti-aircraft guns firing nearby. The scene changes to a battlefield near the fortress of Zapata. A small open-topped flying vehicle with a pilot and a gunner speeds through heavy fire toward a massive Dorok tent decorated with eye symbols. Watching through binoculars, Charuka is shocked to see the pilot. He gasps that he has seen the prophesied blue-clad one. A figure wearing clothes the color of Omu blood. Shaken but resolute, Charuka orders his artillery to bombard the Toramakian fortress and its airstrip to prevent the ship from landing. Massive cannons open fire, their shells streaking toward the fortress. The bombardment causes huge explosions on the fortress airstrip, forcing people to run for their lives. A lord trying to evacuate in his airship is delayed by the shelling. Nearby, the Toramakian general and his officer, Sene, watch in disbelief from their own ship as another vessel flies recklessly into the barrage. The incoming ship crashes violently to the ground, and Sene shouts in horror, recognizing it as Princess Kushana's. Sene immediately organizes a rescue team. Amidst the smoky wreckage, Princess Kushana appears, unharmed and in command. She thanks Sene and instructs his men to help the wounded. Inside the crashed ship, Asbel works desperately to salvage the engine. Nausicaa runs back and forth, carrying injured soldiers from the wreckage to safety. She then dashes back into the dangerous wreck to retrieve her glider, Meve, ignoring Asbel's frantic warnings that the ship is about to explode. A moment later, a massive explosion rips through the crash site. As the huge cloud of smoke rises, a small glider, the Melve, soars out of it and into the clear sky with Nausicaa aboard. Asbel and the others watch in awe, but he quickly realizes that she is hurt. From a distance, the Dorok commander Charuka witnesses the explosion and concludes that it would take more than a simple barrage to kill the blue-clad one. The Dorok army is ordered to prepare for its final assault on the fortress at noon. Inside the fortress, news of Kushana's return spreads like wildfire. On a landing strip, Kushana confronts the cowardly general as he tries to flee with a sack of stolen treasure. She throws him to the ground, scattering the loot, and crushes a bracelet under her boot as she questions his right to abandon his troops. The general calls her a traitor and orders his soldiers to arrest her, but they ignore him completely. The story shifts to a vision where Nausicaa finds herself lying paralyzed inside a stone tomb. She wonders where she is and what is happening. She senses something in a dark corner of the room. A shadowy, monstrous creature with hollow eyes appears from the shadows and looms over her. As it reaches for her, Nausicaa manages to aim a small pistol at it. She recognizes the creature as a specter that has been searching for her. The specter touches her chest, and she feels an intense, hateful coldness from its hands. Lying helpless, she watches the creature, which seems to look right through her. The specter passes over her body without truly noticing her, still searching for what it came for. It moves across the chamber floor before rearing up against a wall, seemingly sobbing in frustration. Then the creature vanishes, leaving Nausicaa alone in the tomb. Nausicaa awakens in a stone room inside the fortress, shivering with a deep chill. Her small fox squirrel, Tato, snarls fiercely, perched protectively on her chest. She sits up and sees that her large bird-like mount, Kai, is also watching over her. Nausicaa thanks her animal companions for protecting her while she was unconscious. She thinks about her vision, feeling that the creature was much closer this time. Getting to her feet, Nausicaa leaves the storeroom and looks out into the fortress. She peeks over a low wall and sees a vast cavern below, crowded with hundreds of people, including many women and children, huddled together. Nausicaa is horrified to recognize some of the children. She runs down a staircase and demands to know what happened. An old man explains that with their ship destroyed, they could no longer care for the children and had to give them away to a woman in exchange for food. Nausicaa rushes toward the cavern, but is stopped at the entrance by 2 guards who point their rifles at her, forbidding her from entering. From the doorway, she looks at the miserable crowd of prisoners. A guard tells her that the people are prisoners of war who were supposed to be sent to Tauromachia as laborers, but since no ships can get through, they have become a burden. Nausicaa is heartbroken and angry, realizing that the war is being fought just to enslave more people. She sees this despicable conflict as a path to self-destruction for everyone involved. In a fortress strategy room, as noon approaches, a group of officers gathers around a map on the floor. An officer explains their plan for a surprise attack, stating that they must destroy the enemy siege guns to buy themselves 2 days. Princess Kushana takes command, outlining her strategy. She tells her officers they will not use the main gates, but will instead blast a new opening in the southern wall under the cover of their own artillery fire. A man, the cowardly general, wryly notes that her unconventional plan would get her failed at a military academy, but Kushana ignores him and begins giving rapid orders. She instructs her engineers to create the opening in 3 minutes for the armored cavalry to charge through and destroy the enemy's front line, and for the artillery to provide covering fire. The plan is to charge the 1.5 leagues to the siege guns and destroy them with heavy explosives, while other units create a diversion at the east gate. Kushana gives a rousing speech, telling her men that this battle is their first step toward returning home. She urges them to be swift and avoid foolish heroics, announcing that she will lead the charge herself. As a final note, she adds that the cowardly general will be joining her at the front of the assault. The other officers erupt in laughter at the thought of the general fighting. The general watches them and thinks to himself how much Kushana has changed her soldiers, inspiring them with new courage. The scene changes to a corridor inside the fortress. Nausicaa walks with a determined expression as soldiers in armor march past her, excited about the upcoming cavalry charge. In Kushana's quarters, Nausicaa confronts the princess, demanding that she release the Dorok prisoners. Kushana is incredulous, asking why she would send reinforcements to the enemy. Nausicaa argues that the prisoners are not soldiers, and that keeping them will only lead to more needless death. Kushana notes Nausicaa's inability to stand by while others die, and asks for help fastening her armor. Nausicaa asks what Kushana will do if she refuses. She then threatens to join the Dorok and fight against Kushana's army. Kushana laughs loudly at the threat, then turns serious, warning Nausicaa that such an act would turn the entire world against her. Her expression softens, and she invites Nausicaa to ride into battle with her. Nausicaa is stunned by the offer. Kushana explains that she will not release the prisoners simply to ease Nausicaa's conscience, as her priority is the lives of her own men. However, she adds that she might listen to the advice of a comrade in arms. Kushana then writes and hands Nausicaa a signed order for the prisoners' release. She gives Nausicaa 40 minutes to prepare for the assault and advises her to wear heavy armor. Later, in a stable, Nausicaa stands with her mount, Kai, feeling troubled about having to fight the Dorok people. Dressed in her helmet, she silently asks for forgiveness, feeling she has no other option. At noon, in a vast stone hall, Nausicaa sits atop Kai, dressed in full armor and armed with a sword and rifle. She is surrounded by hundreds of other mounted cavalry, all waiting silently for the command to begin the assault. Outside the Toramekian fortress, soldiers prepare for the attack. They use a large drill to break through a stone wall, causing it to crumble. Other soldiers place explosives into a hole at the base of the wall. The scene changes to a wide view of the Dorok fortress, a large city built into the side of a cliff, where many soldiers are moving about. Back in the Toramekian camp, Princess Kushana sits on her mount. She tells Nausicaa, who rides beside her, that she looks brave and should ride with her. Kushana then introduces Nausicaa to her troops, announcing that a warrior from the Valley of the Wind has joined them in their time of need, and that they should honor her. At a Dorok artillery position, soldiers load large rockets into launchers and prepare to fire. The scene shifts to a dark chamber inside the Dorok fortress, where a robed attendant stands before a large liquid-filled tank. A powerful being named Miralupa, floating inside the tank, sends out a panicked telepathic scream, sensing that an enemy is coming for him. On the battlefield, a massive volley of Dorok rockets streaks through the sky. They hit the ground with huge explosions, tearing up the earth and throwing soldiers through the air. The bombardment leaves the landscape littered with debris. High on the Doric fortress wall, commanders observe the smoke from the explosions. They believe the Toramekian bombardment is just a desperate last effort and not a real threat. One looks through a telescope but sees nothing through the smoke, assuming there will be few casualties. Back in the dark chamber, Miralupa continues to panic, screaming to be let out of his tank. An attendant warns that Miralupa's body will disintegrate if he leaves the bath before it is finished. Miralupa thrashes violently, and the attendant begs him to be still, as his skin will tear. Miralupa psychically senses that Nausicaa is somehow invisible to him, and believes the spirit of a priest is protecting her. The chief attendant promises to deal with the girl, and orders the others not to open the tank for any reason. Elsewhere, other robed figures in the fortress declare that their lord Miralupa must be defended at all costs. Back at the Toramekian wall, soldiers quickly clear a path through the hole they created. On the Doruk fortress wall, a robed commander becomes suspicious, sensing that the Toramikians are planning something behind the smokescreen. He orders his cavalry to the front lines and tells his men to put the army on full alert by launching signal flares. He then announces he is going to the forward artillery positions. At that moment, the Toramikians blow open their new sallyport. Kushana raises her arm and leads her armored cavalry in a charge out of the opening. Behind their own lines, a Toramekian officer orders his artillery to continue their barrage, providing cover for the main assault. A massive column of armored cavalry pours out from a new opening in the fortress wall, charging onto the battlefield. The sheer size of the force is revealed as a flood of riders storms into the smoke-filled landscape. As they gain speed, the cavalry forms an assault line with lances lowered. They immediately come under fire, and a mechanical projectile strikes one of the lead riders. Closing in on the Doruk trenches, the cavalry draws their swords. A Doruk spotter sees this and calls for an adjustment to their rocket fire, targeting the charging enemy. The cavalry pushes through the enemy artillery, suffering casualties as they go. Nausicaa, riding among them, realizes they are advancing just behind their own artillery shells, which are clearing a path for them. In the Doruk trenches, soldiers are caught completely by surprise when the shelling suddenly moves past them. Before they can react, the Toramekian cavalry is upon them. The riders attack with pistols, and their powerful mounts trample the defenders in the narrow trenches. The Toramekians use explosives to clear obstacles, focusing on pushing forward without slowing down. The scene shifts to a Doruk heavy artillery position far from the front lines. A commander arrives to find the large cannons completely unguarded. The officer in charge, called Reverend One, admits he reassigned the guards, believing they were not needed. The commander is furious, also pointing out that they have stacked explosive shells right next to the guns, creating a deadly hazard. He warns a sergeant not to underestimate the enemy. At that moment, they see the Toramekian cavalry emerging from the smoke, having already overrun the forward trenches. Having broken through the main line of defense, the Toramekian cavalry cheers as they charge across the open field. Realizing his mistake, the Reverend One panics and flees, announcing that he will get the cavalry reinforcements himself. The remaining gun crew tries to aim their cannons at the attackers, but the massive barrels cannot be lowered enough to hit the close-range targets. In a desperate attempt to clear the obstruction, the sergeant grabs 2 grenades to blast the dirt away, but he falls, and the grenades detonate near the cannon's machinery. The Toramekian cavalry swarms the artillery pit, crushing the remaining gunners. Kushana leads the assault, cutting through the enemy ranks. Her soldiers set up machine guns, while Nausicaa provides cover with her rifle. Massive explosions rip through the area as the Doruk siege weapons are systematically destroyed. Kushana calmly deflects a projectile with her sword. One of the large Doruk energy cannons glows brightly before it is blown apart. Toramekian soldiers use heavy slingshots, this is the text in Image 1, that trigger a massive secondary explosion, destroying the entire artillery emplacement. Seeing his prized siege guns being destroyed, a Doruk commander shouts in rage. The Toramekian cavalry continues its charge, riding down any remaining resistance. Another commander panics and desperately calls for his own cavalry. The Doruk cavalry finally enters the battle, their horned mounts thundering across the ground. Another large group of Doruk riders on different mounts also joins the fray, charging from another direction. A Toramekian soldier spots the enemy cavalry approaching their flank and reports their large numbers. Kushana realizes her forces are now in danger of being surrounded. She quickly changes tactics, ordering her main force to continue towards the east gate to secure an escape route, while she takes a smaller company to shield their retreat. She tells Nausicaa that the fight is about to become much more serious. The Dorok cavalry crashes into Kushana's rear guard. A Dorok commander is hit by a projectile during the clash. As he falls, he recognizes Nausicaa's distinctive blue clothing. Believing she is the key to the Toromechian attack, he orders his elite riders to focus all their efforts on killing her. The Dorok cavalry charges towards the Toromechian rear guard. Kushana observes the attack from within her helmet. The Toromechians, however, have anticipated this and shout a command to use grenades. As Dorok foot soldiers swarm them, they realize they have fallen into a trap. A series of powerful explosions tears through the Dorok lines set by the Toromechians. The blasts throw riders and their mounts through the air in a chaotic and fiery spectacle. The carnage is immense, leaving the ground littered with the bodies of Dorok soldiers. Watching from a safe distance, the Dorok commander, Charuka, is furious with himself for falling for the trap. The elite Toromechian cavalry charges through the broken enemy lines, cheering their success. Amidst the destruction, Kushana stands defiantly, proclaiming her identity as the daughter of the Vai Emperor. The battle turns into a chaotic melee. Charuka is confused, wondering why the prophesied savior, the blue-clad one, would be fighting alongside the White Witch of Toromechia. Despite the initial Toromechian success, the broader battle turns against them as explosions rock the field and Dorok machine guns open fire. A large force of Dorok Imperial Guards outflanks Kushana's cavalry. The Toromechians are forced to retreat, trying to keep their escape route from being cut off. On another part of the battlefield, Dorok infantry advances in formation with heavy cannons. The Toromechians realize they are being surrounded. Charuka rallies his surviving troops to press the attack. Kushana's elite cavalry finds itself completely cut off and prepares to fight its way out. Seeing this, Nausicaa decides to act. She and her mount, Kai, break away from the main group alongside Kushana. To Kushana's shock, Nausicaa has Kai leap over the enemy soldiers to get into the open. Kushana yells for her to come back, but Nausicaa ignores her. A squadron of Dorok cavalry spots the lone rider and charges to intercept her. Nausicaa loads a special type of shell into her rifle, hoping a gift from her people will work against the Dorok war beasts. She fires a capsule-like object that detonates with a blinding flash and a deafening sound. The light and noise startle the Dorok mounts, causing them to panic. The Dorok cavalry charge dissolves into chaos as riders lose control of their beasts. Nausicaa sees that her plan is working. From a distance, Kushana wonders what kind of weapon she is using. Nausicaa tells the retreating Toromechians to escape while she holds the enemy off. Kushana is angered by Nausicaa's actions, but accepts the help, laughing as she tells Nausicaa not to get caught. Alone, Nausicaa fires again to keep the Dorok cavalry disorganized as she and Kai ride across the plains. Within Kushana's retreating force, a soldier asks for permission to go back and help Nausicaa, stating that it is a dishonor to abandon such a courageous warrior. Kushana grants permission, and a small squad of 5 riders charges back to support Nausicaa. As she continues her running fight, Nausicaa realizes she only has 2 rounds left. Dorok officers manage to restore some order, commanding their men to dismount and use their guns or circle around to cut off her escape. Watching from a high vantage point, Charuka is amazed that a single rider is holding back his best troops. Another Dorok commander offers a reward for killing the blue-clad one. Nausicaa fires her last round. With her rifle now empty, she urges Kai to run faster as enemy projectiles begin to land around them. Suddenly, she is joined by the 4 heavily armored Toromechian riders who came back for her. They form a protective circle around her, vowing to keep her safe. Nausicaa is distressed, realizing their heavy armor will slow them all down, preventing her from outrunning the pursuing Doroks. Charuka orders his men to open fire. A volley of rifle fire hits the group. The Toromechians shield Nausicaa with their bodies. The powerful Dorok mounts slam into the Toromechian line, overwhelming them. Nausicaa watches in horror as the rider next to her is killed instantly. The Toromechian escort is quickly cut down in the chaotic charge. Nausicaa holds a fallen comrade as a Dorok soldier takes aim at her. She realizes the shot is unavoidable. The rifle fires, and the soldier she is holding is killed, the impact throwing Nausicaa to the ground. The brutal violence overwhelms her. She feels faint and begins to fall from her own mount, consumed by the thought that if she falls, she will die. The battle descends into a horrifying scene of soldiers being trampled and blown apart. A mortally wounded Toromechian rider hands his reins to Nausicaa, telling her to ride as she never has before. Taking control, she spurs the new mount forward, trampling over bodies to escape. Watching her flee, Charuka is disgusted, believing she is using her own soldiers as a shield. He becomes enraged and vows to destroy her himself. Nausicaa looks back with worry, her resolve hardening as she focuses on survival. The scene briefly shifts to the main Toromechian force regrouping outside a fortress. Messengers report that the main assault is succeeding. Kushana's detachment prepares to merge with the larger army. Kushana sits silently on her mount before she is suddenly thrown from her saddle. The story returns to the open plains, where Nausicaa is still being pursued by the Dorok cavalry. She urges Kai onward, heading toward the ruins of a small settlement. 2 elite Dorok riders break away from the main group to intercept her. Nausicaa fires her pistol at them and engages in a sword fight. She blocks strikes from both attackers with her rifle and ceramic blade. With a fierce scream, Nausicaa strikes one of the riders down, killing him. She is immediately filled with shock and horror at what she has done. Charuka, watching from afar, is impressed by her skill, but furious that she might escape. He orders his men to shoot her mount. Nausicaa and Kai race on, but a Dorok soldier takes careful aim. Kai is hit in the leg. The wounded mount stumbles and crashes to the ground, throwing Nausicaa clear. The Dorok soldiers celebrate their success. Charuka orders them to take her alive. Nausicaa rushes to her fallen mount's side, heartbroken. As Dorok soldiers close in, she tries to get Kai to stand. She is quickly surrounded and captured. Charuka approaches the kneeling Nausicaa. From his position, the Dorok priest Charuka observes the captured Nausicaa and is surprised by her noble appearance and lack of hatred. Nausicaa kneels beside her wounded mount, Kai, and begs the soldiers to let her treat his injuries. 2 imperial guards arrive to take custody of the prisoner. One of the guards, who has a prosthetic arm, raises his sword to kill Kai, but Nausicaa throws herself in the way to protect him. The regular Dorok soldiers who captured her object, arguing with the imperial guards over who gets credit for her capture. The head guard silences them, declaring that Nausicaa is a dangerous enemy who may possess secret powers. Suddenly, Nausicaa's small furry companion, Teto, leaps from a pouch and attacks the kneeling imperial guard, knocking him over. As the surrounding soldiers laugh at the guard's expense, the humiliated guard gets to his feet and aims his weapon at Teto. Before he can fire, Teto bites Kai's wounded leg. The jolt of pain causes Kai's eye to snap open. The massive mount struggles to its feet, violently scattering the surrounding soldiers. With Nausicaa clinging to his back, Kai rampages through the Dorok lines, trampling men and attacking another mount before breaking free. Charuka furiously orders his men to pursue them. The scene changes to the open plains where Nausicaa and Kai gallop away. From the battlefield, Charuka watches in disbelief as his men fire at the distant figure. He is shocked that the seemingly mortally wounded mount could run so fast, and begins to suspect that Nausicaa may have used a mysterious power. The location shifts to a fortress held by the Torumachians, where Nausicaa is now heading. Inside, the Torumachian commander Kushana and her officer Kurotoa discuss their recent victory, which has destroyed the Dorok siege weapons. Kushana orders the main gates closed. One of the soldiers who had returned with Kushana asks for permission to keep the gate open a little longer, explaining that Nausicaa had saved his company and might still return. His men volunteer to guard the open gate. Kushana agrees to give them 30 minutes. Shortly after, the soldiers at the gate begin to cheer as they see a lone rider emerge from the smoke. Nausicaa rides Kai through the gates, welcomed by the crowd of cheering soldiers. Once inside the fortress courtyard, the heavily bleeding Kai stumbles and then collapses, throwing Nausicaa to the ground. She kneels beside her mount and grieves for him as he dies. When a soldier asks about the escort that went back to help her, Nausicaa tearfully explains that they all died while shielding her. The officer comforts her and orders his men to salute the fallen mount before closing the gates. From a distance, Kushana orders that Kai be given a burial with full military honors. She reflects on Nausicaa's path before turning her attention back to her own violent destiny. The scene changes again to the Dorok command post on the battlefield. Charuka accepts full blame for Nausicaa's escape and offers to give up his command. The Dorok Supreme Commander, Mirolupa, denies his request, stating that Charuka's first-hand knowledge of Nausicaa is too valuable. Mirolupa declares that they must crush the Torumachians in the fortress immediately, before the planting season causes his soldiers to desert. He announces his plan to use either the toxic jungle or the giant insects to win the battle. Charuka is horrified and protests that doing so will only hasten the spread of the wastelands. Their argument is interrupted by a messenger who reports that Dorok tribespeople, held as prisoners by the Torumachians, are being released from the fortress. The final image shows a large column of people walking away from the fortress walls.